Good day and welcome to SCO BRICS Insight, where we talk about the latest news, information and analysis of what's really going on in Russia and the BRICS. Now, my name is Rhod Mackenzie, and today I want to talk about the EU and how it's deluded into thinking it can go to war and even defeat Russia. On the eve of the Munich Security Conference in February of this year, an interesting document was published. It's entitled the Munich Security Report 2025, and it's evident that the primary message of the report has been largely overwrought, which has contributed to the current challenging economic, political and social environment in Russia and Europe. Now, the message is the EU is facing a combination of crises which could potentially compromise its security, economic stability and ideological foundations unless there's a significant increase in military expenditure across the EU. In other words, the process of militarization will undoubtedly prove to be beneficial and that Russia will suffer a significant setback and be forced to withdraw back across its borders, leading to a favourable outcome for the European Union. Now, this approach has proved popular as evidenced by the European Commission's approval of a significant military spending plan known as ReARM Europe with a budget of €800 billion just a month later in March. Now, in order to counter some of the concerns of countries regarding the potential benefits of increased military expenditure, the European Commission has presented a calculation which shows that if 20% of the increase in military spending is allocated to capital investment, this will result in an additional 0.2% increase in GDP growth. Now, the European Investment Bank has also professionally assured that the significant increase in the EU's defence budget will have a multiplier effect on GDP growth. Now, the European Führer in a skirt, Ms. von der Leyen, has stated that the ongoing military competition with Russia necessitates ongoing investment in defence and the funding of Ukraine's technological superiority. Now, the Defence Preparedness Plan for the year 2030 will be pivotal. In total, more than €800 billion is going to be mobilised, so there's sufficient funding, so that means there's no cause for concern. Now, before I continue, I would like to make an appeal. If you like and enjoy my videos, you can help me fund the channel and my website, scobricsinsight.com, and contribute to its further development. You can do this by making a small donation, which you can do by clicking on the thanks button at the bottom of the video screen. Everybody who donates does get a personal thank you from me, and keep the comments coming. Love to read them, love to respond to them. Now, however, as is often the case in Europe and its Lviv environments, there's a number of issues leading to a deviation from the expected course. At the end of June, the British-based New Economics Foundation published a report on the growth of European military spending. Now, the report's conclusion is absolutely clear. It says rather than addressing the pressing issues of climate crisis and social instability, the focus on rearming appears to be driven more by political motivations than by economic realities. The report goes on. The trade-off is not economically or strategically viable. The European resources have expressed concern that the EU military plan increases the risk of a 2008-style financial collapse. Now, the World Economic Forum compounded the situation. The cost of security for Europe is facing serious challenges. Now, it's been determined that the increase in the EU military expenditure is occurring at a particularly inopportune juncture, coinciding as it does with a confluence of factors including the rapid accumulation of national debt, the escalation of tariffs and trade disputes, and it's an imperative now to curtail social welfare programmes. It's an unfortunate occurrence that we must all face from time to time. Perhaps there was a fortunate twist in the stars that led to this outcome. But it is possible that they have, but there's been a series of synchronicity. According to Jamie Dimon, the globalist CEO of JP Morgan, the European economy is in a period of serious decline, with significant losses being incurred across the board. Furthermore, he is not lacking in candidness. He says Europe is currently experiencing a serious demographic crisis, with the number of pensioners increased by 50% between 1991 and 2022. Plus, the UK Office for National Statistics has reported that its economy has contracted for the second consecutive month. Plus, the Office for Budget Responsibility that states that in the UK, the situation can only get worse, and the worst is certainly yet to come, and that the next generation of Britons might actually not live long enough to receive their state pensions, as they will keep moving the age of receiving your pensions further up. Now, this poses a significant challenge for many European countries, as evidenced by their stagnating economies, accelerated deindustrialisation, and the escalating costs of essentials, food, housing, medicine and energy. I mean, notably, gas prices surged by 20% in January and February, and Eurostat Purchasing Power Index reached its lowest point since 2013. Now, there's only one way to achieve success in this situation, and all officials and analysts agree. They have to defeat Russia, and in order to do this, they need to raise taxes or cut all non-military expenditure, or better yet, both. At present, plans are being incorporated in Europe to reduce pensions, limit salaries, and reduce spending on healthcare and education. Analysts predict the risk of the double blow, the high debt plus more austerity, and that is the military economic mobilisation of Europe is carried out, the cost of a drop in the standard of living, and the delayed budget shocks. Of course, the news in the UK from in the US is Donald Trump has announced the introduction of 30% duties on imports from the EU to the US, which will come into effect on August the 1st, and that's going to hit them hard. So Europeans, they must be tired of a peace and comfortable lifestyle. They've got to be happy with the idea of militarisation, according to the latest data from the European Trust Barometer. Yeah. I mean, Europe's turning into a society of divided, offended and deceived. Now, it's interesting to note at the same time, new taxes are being introduced on petrol, diesel, electricity, airline tickets, plastic packaging, sugar-sweetened drinks, tobacco, alcohol, digital services, financial transactions, real estate and anything else. In fact, the motto in Europe is now, if it moves, tax it. If it doesn't move, tax it till it does. However, on the bright side, since the taxation of fresh air and tears is yet to be implemented, life will continue as normal. Now, European businesses are quite similarly optimistic. According to the latest data, almost 50% of the large and energy-intensive enterprises in Germany are considering moving overseas. The other 50% are considering going out of business. Now, this approach has been very successful so far. I mean, it's important to note that success is always relative, and the German Chancellor Merz has expressed his desire to make Germany the strongest military power in Europe. Probably wants to emulate his grandfather, who was involved with Mr. Schicklgruber. So what are the reasons for it? Well, it's aesthetically pleasing. Let's remember their parades and rallies in Germany in the 1930s, and all these people in there. And soldiers with their smart Hugo Boss designed uniforms, where Merz's grandfather was actively involved. And of course that's because the diplomatic avenues for resolving the Ukraine have been dispatched to the dustbin, so defeating Russia is the new mantra. Now, following the recent incident, the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov stated that Merz has decided to dedicate himself to the full militarization of Germany, which will be at the expense of the lifestyle and the well-being of the German people, in order to make progress under the Third Reich slogans, the threats that come from Russia. Now, the press secretary of the Russian president, Peskov, commented that the EU is spending tens of billions of taxpayer monies in an attempt to weaken Russia. But it would actually be easier if Europe would just take into account Russia's security concerns and begin a mutually respectful dialogue. But that's not on the agenda at the moment. I mean, in contrast to the highly civilized European approach, the Russian leadership is not focused on reducing the civilian economy and the social welfare sector, but rather they're on strengthening them. At a recent Innerprom event, Mikhail Shustin, the Russian Prime Minister, said that despite the unprecedented sanctions, almost all sectors of Russian industry are showing growth and progress. And he is convinced that working together they will all achieve their goals. So the situation must be a serious level of frustration for those in Europe. But ultimately, they're all responsible for the consequences of their actions. And if they want to try and emulate Mr. Napoleon Bonaparte and Mr. Adolf Schicklgruber, go ahead. You'll probably end up the same way. Thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe. And if you want to help me out, click on the donation button at the bottom of the screen. Thank you.